Hi guys, this is Leif, aka Evil Nerd Inc. It's been a little while since I posted a video, and I've noticed that people have been asking like, hey, where I want to see more tutorial videos, etc, etc. I think that people really like seeing me crack packs and doing those alters and stuff like that, and hopefully I'll get some of those up soon as well, but I have kind of neglected the tutorial videos. Like I did the base layer and then it just kind of stopped. So I think today what I'm going to do is show you the next step for blocking out colors. And I'm also going to show you how to pick out elements that make sense in the foreground of the image to make pop out and things like that. So most alters start doing partial alters, which is not making the card full art, and some alters, that's all that they ever do. I started with doing that because it's easy to pick out just a detail or two, and then it kind of makes it pop out, make the card look cool. But then I realized that sometimes if it's done very well, people don't realize that anything's been done at all. So I ended up switching over to doing the full extensions or the borderless cards, because then people really do notice that the card has been altered. But in the same way, if it's done well, it's almost easy to just be like, oh, well, that card was always like that, and that really isn't the case. So but I think having a brief discussion of the way to pick out elements to alter is important, if you're just trying to do an extension or add something on. And so the way that I've kind of resolved that issue, I think, is I'll discuss in this video, and then I'll give you an example of that, as well as I'm going to show you the next step of how to block out colors. Last time we did the background, and I'll also show you, how the progression that you go from there, what the next step is. So let's get to it. Okay guys, so here in front of me are some random cards, and when I say random, I really do mean random. I just kind of grabbed a stack of useless cards lying about, I believe from a random draft or sealed pool or something, and I looked through for some various types of cards to kind of show you easy ways to pick out elements. So yeah, there's no real rhyme or reason why I'm working on these cards or looking at these cards, other than that they were random and I wanted to show you some different things. So when you're picking out details that you want to embellish, that you want to add something to make the card look more interesting, some cards have them and some cards don't. So I'm going to be talking a lot about a couple of art terms, and if you recall back to high school art class, this is not going to be anything new, but it might be a refresher some, or it might be new information for others. But anyways, basically within any image, there's a foreground and a background. Foreground is the image that pops out. It appears to be the closest to the viewer. So for instance, in the executioner swing, quite obviously this figure is in the foreground, this executioner, and the background is Ravnica, right? Presumably somewhere in the Orzhov district. Over here with the Pegasus, again, it's very clear this Pegasus is in the foreground. These buildings are close also in the foreground in comparison to just blank sky. The Gruul charm, again, the hammer, Thor's looking hammer here, very much in the foreground, everything else in the background. Here with Fatal Fumes, for instance, though, this card, there really isn't much of a foreground. This character is a bit closer than the shadowy area in the background, but he's still very far away from the viewer's point of view. So we might actually not call that the foreground. This smoke, however, could be considered part of the foreground, but it's a little unclear because like it wraps up and it's back behind him, but it could be in front of him too. Like, so it could be a lot of different places. A lot of Magic cards will actually be like this, in that the image is pieces in foreground and background, but they're set very, very far behind the border, in the sense that like you don't feel that you're missing any part of this image, nor are you feeling it really in any of these three. On this Pegasus, you're definitely feeling the lack of the wings. The wings feel cut off here because this is so much further forward, you know, perception-wise, than the sky in the background. Part of that is also you get this, you know, this scale. You don't think that this Pegasus is massive. You think that it's a regular-sized Pegasus, and these buildings are bigger than it, but they're further away. So we get this great sense of depth here from having a background that's very far away, then something in the medium like field of vision, and then something in the foreground. So like we feel some sort of loss with that this tail and these two wings, for instance, we're missing those. So this would be like a great example of a card that you can easily see something to add into the foreground that you would pick out to paint, you know, alter, add those details on. Would be the wing on either or both sides, and or the tail. You could leave the tail behind and just do like one of the wings, like let's say this wing's probably closer, coming out under the border. Then that would look like this. That'll make this image appear as though it's straddling the border, so to speak. That if this wing was behind and this wing was in front. And then I'm going to jump to the other side. This last card, the experimental one, arguably the best card out of all of these, because this is actually seeing like standard play and whatnot. Again, you very clearly have an image. Let me move it over in case you can't really see it all that well. You very clearly have your humanoid figure in the foreground with this like rock, and then in the background it's just like this misty haze forest type of thing going on behind him. So what's actually also helping to create this is not only is the image actually closer, but you're getting this very three-dimensional look with this image because it's got a lot of color variation. So like it's dark in the foreground where there's this blue guy and the rock that he's on, and then it's really light behind him. Also here, again, it's popping out quite a bit because you have an object that's really dark in the foreground, and then it's got a lighter background. So that's a common element that you're going to find in a lot of cards, that you're going to find something really easy to do a partial alter on. So like here, I have already explained that like the wings coming out and or the tail would be good partial alters to make this card pop out quite a bit. With this guy, it's a little bit more difficult in the sense that like, you know, he's not coming up here, he's all down here, and unless I want to take out this whole text box or something, I can't easily add that stone in. But what I can do, if I look carefully, you know, as I see all these little tentacly bits that kind of get cut off, but we see that they're kind of arcing out and doing interesting things. So what I could choose to do is just bring the tentacles, make them look like they're kind of just creeping over the edge here, like he's grabbing onto this and they're hanging over it, and throw some drop shadows and stuff on there. I'm actually going to show you on this card, on the Experimental Ooze, how I would do that as a partial alter. later what I will probably do with this experimental one is I'll full out the card, but I'll start with a partial alter, which is also going to give you the concept of blocking out the colors too. So hopefully that makes some sense. Like this this Executioner swing is great in the sense that this axe is really in your face. You know, it's much bigger than the character. I mean, if this were really to scale, like he were holding this and it weren't angled the way it was, like that axe would be massive compared to him, right? But what it's done is the artist is using perspective, and this axe head is much larger than he is, and he's much larger than these buildings, even though that's completely reversed, right? Buildings are bigger than a person, and a person's bigger than an axe. So like this is not a great candidate for doing an extension, because really all I see is just a tiny little bit of this axe that's being hidden by the border. And then like down here, his legs and stuff are conveniently being hidden. If we brought his legs out, we would have to create something for him to stand on. And so we're going to, by doing that, we're going to end up taking a lot of this text out and stuff. And as you know, with my style, I don't particularly like to do that. I'd have to create like a foreground and his legs. And then this would really sink back. It would look really far away. But, you know, that's not really my style. Again, the same thing with the Gruul Charm. You know, sweet looking card. But the only bit that's really going to make sense to extend would be like these little flames coming out over the top. And that's not really enough to draw anybody's attention. The Fatal Fumes, like I said, is in the background mostly. So this is a type of piece that's going to be suited best by just doing an extension. If I wanted to add a foreground bit, I would probably do some sort of smoke, actually starting from the bottom, because I can do it in very thin layers and you'd still be able to see the text behind it, just be somewhat obscured, and I'd go all the way over the border to make an additional layer. But, you know, that's something that is incidental to this piece. This is not actually a good one for doing like a partial alter. So I'm trying to show you on kind of some easy examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you on the experimental one. Again, I've got my water, I've got my card that I'm working on. I'm working on upside down. This is my right hand, to try and give you guys the best example that I can. My little board that I use and my paper towels to keep everything clean. This time I'm actually using my wet palette. I've been doing more miniature painting again lately, and basically what this is this is a P3 wet palette. You don't have to get a P3 one if you don't want to. Effectively what it is a little plastic container with a sponge that you pour water into, and they give you sheets that are parchment paper. You can go to any store and get parchment paper. It's in the baking aisle. Sometimes they'll call it baking paper or something like that. And it's great in that it will absorb some of the water, but it doesn't like come through. My fingers can, like this one's wet because I just dabbed it in some water, but like my finger is completely dry. The reason that it's good is when I put my paint on here, the paint doesn't dry up from the heat of these lights and or just evaporate. It will wick some of the water from this sponge through into the parchment paper. You can see that I actually use this is a trick that I got from one of my friends. I found that just using the parchment paper like on the sponge, it got too watery. So what I did is actually created another layer just using a paper towel folded over, and that gives me a little bit better water control. And you can see that like the parchment paper is pretty dry, but then I throw it down on here and you can see that it like moistens up a bit. So the paint will only draw what water it needs to stay at its current viscosity, if you will. It'll stay as wet as it
as it actually is, but it doesn't get much worse. And the advantage to that is it's really easy to clean. Like this parchment paper, I can get a huge roll of it for like a couple bucks, so I can cut up a bunch of these tiny squares, and when I'm done working on it, I can throw it away. But this will hold paint for days if I want, wet. It won't dry up. Whereas like on the dry palette that I was using before, one, it's a pain to clean. As you can see, you know, painting on this over time, it's accrued a bunch of paint, and then the paint dries out very quickly. Like I can leave paint on here or work with it for hours and it's fine. This, I have maybe a couple minutes of working time. So those are the pros and cons of a wet palette. I can basically show you how to make your own wet palette, which maybe I'll do at a later point. But this was a very inexpensive purchase that I made years ago, and I figure I might as well use it and explain the advantages and disadvantages. So what I'm going to do is start with my administrative gray here, my light gray. Doesn't have to be that gray, it's just a light gray. Going to add it on my palette, add a little bit of water to thin it down. And what I'm going to do is, instead of masking out the whole background like I've done before, I'm doing my partial alter. So what I'm going to do is just mask out the bits of the tentacle that I'm adding on. So this is me just kind of freehanding, figuring out where stuff should go. I don't really want to block the text too much, so I'm going to try and keep it to a minimum. Plus I don't want to make this video too long. Like, I have a habit sometimes of rambling on, so I'm just going to do it with a couple different little spots here. Alright, so I've done the part that I've already shown you, which is creating a masking layer that I'm going to be able to build up from. In this particular case, you know, I'm still using the gray just like I did with the borders, and I'm adding 1, 2, 3, 4 tentacles going over the border just to make this guy pop out, look a little bit more three-dimensional. They're gray, and the tentacles are not gray. They're this kind of purpley color. So my paint's pretty much dry already. What I will do at this point is I will actually get my, let's see if I can, sorry, there's like paint stuck on the front of this. It looks like the color here is Kairos Purple. It's another GW paint. I pretty much use GW paints exclusively. I also use P3 paints. I like those too. A few people have been trying to get me onto like Goldens and stuff like that. I think those are all perfectly acceptable. I'm kind of intrigued by Goldens because they have like an applicator tip. It's like a little point, so you can just kind of put a drop down. You just tip it over and put a drop down. But so this next step, what I'm doing now, this gray is already dry. I'm going to go directly over the gray with the color that is basically what these are. They're a purple. I'm going to end up highlighting with like a light blue, and I'm going to add some shadows with like a black, but the colors are primarily purple. And so what you want to do when you block out your color, with this guy, I would use purple and then go both lighter and darker. Use light blues and blacks. If with this color, for instance, I would use a very dark gray, or maybe even a black, and then just build up to the lighter colors. If I was working on, let's say I was doing these fatal fumes, I would just use a generic green that's as close to this green that I could, and then use yellow. So basically what you want to do is just find your middle tone of that color that you're going to be using. That might not make a lot of sense, but I'm trying. So I'm going to just go directly over my gray, and just over my gray, I'm not going anywhere else, with my purple color. We're gonna lighten this up and darken it down in some spots, so don't worry. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect with the first layer. That's one of the things that you'll learn as you're painting, whether it's canvas or it's magic cards or it's miniatures. One of the things that you end up learning is it looks awful throughout the process until you're at the end. You basically just have to learn the steps, and then go through the whole process. So, you know, you do your base layer or your priming layer, which was the gray. Then you do your you start blocking in your color, which in this case was the purple. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and start adding details and depth. Okay, so it's basically a three-part process. So it gets a little bit more extravagant than that. This is a foundation paint. I don't think that they make these anymore, but the color here is Fenris Gray. It's kind of like a grayish blue. And I'm going to mix this into my purple here. This is going to give me a little bit closer to the color that that I'm seeing on the card itself. And what I'm going to do with this detail as I'm going into it, as you can see, is I painted into here, and then I actually went on to the other part that I didn't prime at all. This is called overpainting. And essentially what you do is you're blending the existing color and your new color together. I don't know what the purple is that he used, but I'm going to simulate a nice gradient or transition by doing a little bit of overpainting. It will look very close to his final color when I'm all done with it. Alright, so all I'm doing, and there's parts where I'm not touching the purple at all. That's something important. You kind of want to show your layers. That is, I didn't cover up all of my purple, like I just used more of the blue on the tops, so you can still see that there's that actual purple still showing through. That's important because having your colors represented is what ends up creating depth and shade. So like here, or I'll use this, like the top of his head, for example. So if you have one of these cards, you can really like look closely at it. He's got purple here, and then he's got this grayish blue around it, and then he's got black. And the purple, and then he's even got a little bit of white right here in the middle. So like that gives you a sense that this is a round, and then also that white there is giving it a little bit of like a sheen to make it look kind of glossy. So having just one color doesn't do anything for you. Having lots of colors is how people actually get this effect. The next color I'm going to use is Abaddon Black, which is really just any black. I think they used to call it Chaos Black before. I'm almost 100% sure that they used to call it Chaos Black, but it doesn't need to be any type of special black as long as you're using high quality paints. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that that blue gray, mix it in with just a little bit of this, and I'm going to thin it out a little bit. And I'm just basically going to hit up the areas that I want to have a little more shaded. So I'm following whoever this is. This is Chase Stone. So I guess that could be a her. I'm pretty sure it's a him though. Their color guide, so to speak, in the sense that it's darker on the bottom here. The light is coming from behind him, and so the underside is what's getting shaded. And you can see that, like, I'll apply the paint and then I'll wipe some of it off. I'll get water. What I'm doing there is a technique that I'll talk about later, which is just for blending it. But effectively, you can see that it's really starting to come along here, right? It's really starting to look like something. The tops are looking a little flat though, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of this is Enchanted Blue is the color. It's just a lighter blue. Again, I don't know what blues that the artist used. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of my gray. And might even get a little bit of that purple just so I get the tone closer. And what I'm trying to do is just hit up the tops of just like little points that, and I'll mix more of this gray in. I'll actually use this gray as almost like my white, in the sense that I don't want to actually go all the way to white. I just want to brighten up the colors just a little bit. So I'm turning around so I can see better. I've been painting upside down the whole time. And what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll get a little bit of this more purpley color to make sure that the blue doesn't stand out too much. And I'll get a little bit of this gray color. I'm going to define more shadow on this tentacle and a little bit more here. Like I'm just getting almost straight black. Yeah, that's coming along pretty nice. Okay, and there you go. Like that's how you do a layer progression with colors. I started with my gray. I added my purple to just block in all of that color. Then I adjusted it with a little bit of this blue, and then went with a little lighter blue and again used some of the gray, and then used black. So like the black is creating the shadows, right? The blues, like it was all purple, and then the blues I'm just using to do my highlights. That's essentially it. That is how you create it. And then what I was talking about with a little bit of overpainting, where I paint into the art that's already there without any type of masking in the background, helps to blend the colors that I'm using to the colors that are on the card. Because if I were to actually take a snapshot and compare this color right here, like, and then like Photoshop it up against like his chest, it's gonna look out of place. But because it's further away from everything else, and I used a little bit of that technique, it will give you the illusion that you want to create.